All right, hi everyone. My name is Brian Beach. I am the tech lead for our next-gen developer experience community. So I spend a lot of time talking to customers about our developer products, things like CodeCatalyst, obviously, which we're going to talk about today, Code Whisperer, and the rest of the CI/CD solutions, infrastructure as code, and then all of our toolkits, SDKs, and the other products that you're working with. So what I want to do today is, very briefly, I've got about 20 minutes here, go through a quick demo end-to-end of CodeCatalyst and how it can help you and your developers work better in AWS. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to start with just a couple slides. I promise that'll be really quick, maybe 3 minutes. And I'll go through that as quick as I can, and then we'll jump in and we'll do demos. And I really want to focus on just going through the demos and understanding what the tool does, so you get a better idea of what CodeCatalyst is. Is anyone familiar with CodeCatalyst, using CodeCatalyst? Okay, a little bit, good. So we released this last year at reInvent in preview. It is now GA, it went GA mid-2023. But I want to give you just an overview and build just a bit more awareness here. So why did we build this tool? It's really about reducing friction. So did anyone ever read the Unicorn Project or the Phoenix Project before that? People somewhat familiar with that book, right? Yeah, so great. So in the Unicorn Project, right, the main character, Maxine, she's going through these struggles as she joins a new team and is trying to get up to speed. And what really stood out to me were those first couple weeks that she was struggling, where she couldn't even build the application, right? She couldn't run a build on her own laptop and be a productive member of the team. And there's just so much friction built into development today that it can be really hard just to simply get started on a new team, let alone actually make meaningful contributions and move quickly, to get into that state of flow we talk about in DevOps. And so these are the problems that we're trying to solve here, to get to the point where we can make it really easy to set up your environment, to codify all of the best practices that are part of your project, make those part of your application, and get a new developer on board really quickly, get them to be able to start a new project much more quickly, and then to build the best practices into that project template. And so those are all things that CodeCatalyst can do. So what is CodeCatalyst? This is an end-to-end software development lifecycle product that takes you through everything from the act of writing code, through committing your code into a repository, going through the build, test, and deploy process, and then also helping you with the collaboration across your team. How do you track your bugs and feature requests and know who's working on what? Okay? And so it does all of that in one product. And there's 4 benefits that I really want to focus on today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a lot about the project setup. So how can we build templates for our projects that have all of the tools you need as part of it, that define your workflow, that define your development environments, that include all of your security best practices, and prepare you to be able to start new projects much more quickly and make sure that the things that your developers are working on are following your best, the best practices and guidance of your organization, in incorporating all of your security standards as part of it. Then we want to be able to design the workflow, the CI/CD process that's going to manage the deployment of that code. It's going to handle the build process. It's going to make sure that all of our security checks are done, give us reporting on any security vulnerabilities, run the various linters and things that you need in order to validate your application. And then the actual development environment itself, this is that problem that I was talking about that Maxine had. We want to we want to standardize that development environment and make it part of the project so that when a new developer comes on, they can just immediately be productive because all of the tooling is installed for them. And then the last thing that I'll talk about, the last thing that I'll demo is how we can collaborate using CodeCatalyst and understand who's working on what and what's happening within the team. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is project setup. And what I want to talk about is a capability in CodeCatalyst called a blueprint. And that is a template for a new project that includes all of the standards, all of your security best practices, all defined in that blueprint. So with that, let me jump over to a demo here. Okay, great. So here I am logged into CodeCatalyst. And probably the first thing that stands out if you're an AWS user is this experience is outside the AWS console. I am not in the AWS console like I normally would be for most AWS services. This functions more as a SaaS-like solution, which makes it much easier to work across and deploy into lots of AWS accounts. In some of our previous tooling, when you were working in an AWS account, it was much easier to deploy into that same account than it was to deploy into other accounts. And so by pulling this out, it makes it a lot easier to treat everything equally. And so I'm logged into a space. This is my kind of playground space where I do demos, and I've got a few projects already launched. What I want to do here is go and create a new project. Okay. There's a couple different things that I could do. I could start from scratch with just an empty solution and start building up from the ground up. If I've got code that's maybe out in GitHub or something else that already exists that I want to bring in, I could import that in, right? I could bring that code into this environment and use it. Or what I really want to focus on is using blueprints. And so these blueprints, again, are templates for projects. And we've built a bunch of blueprints for typical projects that we see our customers working on. Things like a front-end web application that's a single-page app, or serverless applications. You see things in here for Kubernetes and Lambda deployments and stuff like that. In addition, you can build your own blueprints. So within your organization now, you can create your own custom blueprints. This is a new announcement that just happened this week. And then you can build blueprints that represent your best practices and have people within your organization reuse those. So what I'm going to do for this demo, I'm going to keep the demo itself really simple. I want a really simple workload so we don't get lost in that. And so I'm going to create a static website. Anyone play with Hugo or Jekyll in the past? So most of you seem like you're familiar with it. So this blueprint is going to deploy. I'm just going to deploy a blog using Hugo. And so you can see here, it gives me a nice description and describes the architecture, which is simply we're going to render static content, put it in Amplify hosting. So hit next. The next thing you'll see is that these blueprints, they're very customizable. So I can be very specific. This one is a static website, so you see options like Hugo and Jekyll, and I've got different options for my build process. What I'm going to do is set up a full pipeline that does build, test, and deploy. And in this case, I'm going to push this into my development environment, and it's a demo, so I'll run as admin. You shouldn't do that, of course, don't do that, but for demo purposes, I will. And so I'll just create this quick demo here, and I'll create this project. And so it's going to take it maybe 60 seconds or so. Or it's not going to do that. Nothing like getting an error during your demo. Let's try that one more time. Put that in dev, and like this. Let's create that project. Sorry about that, not sure what happened. Hopefully this one will run. It should take about 60 seconds to build out the project. And what it's going to do is, behind the scenes, it's going to create for me my repository. It's going to set up my CI/CD pipeline and get that running. And it's going to set up all the other pieces like my development environment, which you'll see in a minute. And we'll dig in a second when it's done and take a look at what that is like. All right, great. So that finished. Let's dig in and take a look at what that blueprint created. So the first thing we're going to look at is our source repository. So this is the source code for the application. And if I click on this, it looks like you would expect from any Git repository. You've got your file structure, and then you've got your README file here as well. And if you've played with Hugo, the content folder is where we're going to add new content. We're going to add a blog post in this particular case. You can see here that this is empty right now, other than this git keep file that just allows me to keep an empty folder around as part of the project. Okay, so that's step one, right? I've used this template, and it's created the project for me with all the resources. We'll look at some of the other resources in a minute. That's done. The next thing that I want to do, though, is I want to go in and start working on this project. It's time for me to do some development. And so I could first clone this repository, okay, and bring it down onto my machine. But I would prefer to use these dev environments that we support. And so what a dev environment will do is we'll launch a dev environment. It's going to create a container in AWS, hosted on AWS, and then allow me to work remotely in that container. Okay, I could do that, of course, in Cloud9. I'm going to demo in VS Code, but I could also have done this with the JetBrains IDEs if that's your preference. So I'm going to go into VS Code. I could work in a new dev branch and then merge it back in later. In this case, I'm just going to stay right in the main branch. And so I'll let it create this dev environment for me. And you can see here in the background, it is creating that container. It's launching the dev environment for me. This is really powerful, right? I can do things like if I need a really big machine to work on, or I need a GPU in my environment, or I'm working on an ARM-based Mac, maybe I need an Intel machine for my development environment. This allows me to do that. It also allows me to have a dev environment for each project. So then I don't have the conflicts that you might have. You start working on another project and you install some dependencies that break the project you were working on yesterday. When you go back to it, you can't. So it's launched that now. And I'm just going to say open this in VS Code. OK. And so the AWS toolkit is installed in VS Code. And it very seamlessly just connects and sets up the SSH tunnel for me here. You can see I'm connected over SSH. And opens my project in VS Code. So I have the full fidelity of a local IDE, but I'm connected remotely and working in this container that's running within AWS. Okay. So now let's go in and let's create a post. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab this. And let's bring up a terminal. Let's maybe make that a little bigger so you can see it. And I'm going to add a new post in here, right? Remember, this is the same repository we saw earlier. There's no code in it. I'll ask it to create this my first post. And I'll also come and just grab this sample content to add to it. Just a simple hello world. So I'll go into posts. I'll open up this my first post. And I'll add this here. And then next, I'm just going to run a quick Hugo serve. And we'll see this in debug mode. So here's that simple first post that I created. You can see here my first post, and it's just got a hello world content in it. Notice, though, that this feels just like I'm working in a local thing that's installed on my machine, right? I'm connected to localhost. You see that odd port number. It is capturing that, and then the toolkit is redirecting that over the SSH tunnel back into my dev environment running in AWS, where this is actually happening, right? So it feels just like I'm working locally, but I have all the power of this container that's running within AWS. So great. So we've made some simple changes. What I'm going to do next is let me go back and commit that, and I'll push this back in. So edit a post, and I'll commit this back to my CodeCatalyst repository. While that's happening, I want to pause for a minute, right? Hugo is installed in here. I didn't have to do anything to make that happen. That's not part of our standard image. Most tools are there. Things like Python and JavaScript are already pre-installed with all the tools you need as a developer. Hugo is not one of them. So let's look at how I did that. There is this open standard called a dev file that describes all the things that should be part of this machine. And so you can see here first, I'm using the universal image. That will bring down most of my developer tools, the things that I would need as a developer on a day-to-day basis. But there was a couple extra things that I needed. So I put some commands in at the bottom that allowed it to download Hugo and then install Hugo for me. So every developer that's working in this, when they launch one of these environments, they just automatically get all the tooling installed. And notice that this container, this image, is actually a container itself, but also notice that this is an array. So if I need maybe an Apache instance and a MySQL instance, and my developers will need that to work, I can just add those containers into the mix, and all of them will be part of this dev image when it launches. And all of that will be available to you. So you can very easily set up consistent environments for your developers to work in and allow them to be productive immediately. So with that, let's jump back to our site here. And we'll come in here, and let's go in and we'll look at the commits. And you can see here that here's that I added a post. And we added some content in, right? We added that first post into the mix. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about are the CI/CD processes. So if we come over to workflows, we should have two running. One happens on a pull request, and this one happens when I push to main. And so that's run twice now. Once when I created the project that deployed an empty website, and then the second one added the post to it. And so we can go in and take a look at that. This is an extremely simple three-step process, right? Check out, build the site, and then deploy it to Amplify. But it could be a lot more complicated. And in this case, you see here, I have the ability to see the app that's been deployed. And now we're looking at the same site we saw before in debug mode, but you can see here that now it's deployed to Amplify. It's being hosted in AWS. Within a couple seconds, that workflow ran and pushed my update out to Amplify hosting. If I wanted to, I could come in and edit this. This is a pretty simplistic workflow, but these are really powerful. They're set up as a YAML file that's part of my project, but I have a nice visual editor that I can use. So if I wanted to, I could come in and add additional actions to this. And we have CodeCatalyst actions for most things that you would do in AWS. So things like build and test, deploy to Kubernetes or ECS, deploy a CloudFormation template, CDK. Most of the things that you want to do, there are actions here to do within the AWS ecosystem. There are also probably many things that you want to do that are outside the AWS ecosystem or are using open source components that will deploy on AWS. And so we also support the vast majority of GitHub actions. So I can change this and then see all the GitHub actions that are part of this. And so, for example, I like to use Liquibase for my database deployments, or maybe if you're using serverless.io, the serverless framework, and you prefer that, all of that is supported through GitHub actions. This is a curated list of the top ones that we see customers using, but you can use most any GitHub action by just changing the uses statement. Whew. Sounds exciting. Okay, so and then I can just add these into my workflow and put them in the right sequence and configure these. Okay, so that's workflows. We looked at a template that put all of this together. We looked at our development environments and the ability to configure them with all the right tools. And then we looked at a consistent deployment process. This is admittedly a very simple one, but if you had security checks that you wanted to put in there, linters that you wanted to make sure were establishing certain code quality standards, running unit tests, all of that you could do as part of this. So with that, we've got just a couple minutes left. The last thing that I want to look at is the issues capability. And so this is the ability to collaborate on projects. So I can come in here and I can create a new issue, maybe, add a second post, and I could decide maybe who to assign that to. I can do things like set priority on it, and this will then sit in my Kanban board, and I can work it through the different steps. I think, though, rather than watching me add a few of these, I've already created a project that has a couple issues in it. And so here, I've created different blog posts for each of the AWS services. And so you can see I've already deployed S3 and SNS and SQS. Those posts are published as part of this. And you can see, actually, this is them here, right? This is that simple site. And then I've got a couple others that are in various states of work that are being developed actively. This one isn't started yet. This one's in process. This one's waiting to be reviewed. Notice that some of these, though, are run by Q. Probably heard a little bit about Amazon Q this week, right? This is an AI agent. And I can take these tasks and I can assign them to a human, or I can assign them to the AI and ask it to do them. So we'll look at this RDS one here. You can see here, I said I need to add a new blog post, a new page for RDS. And I told it, I want you to add a new page, put it in this folder, include the service name and a short description similar to the other pages that are already in that folder. And so then it went off and did some work. And it went and read through the repository. And it gave me this background and said, hey, here's what I found out about it. This looks like, hey, this seems to be a Hugo site. It's using this theme. All of the files appear to be in this folder using this format. And it went and discovered all of this. It learned all of that by just looking at the code. And then it comes down, and the next thing it says is, I'm going to generate an approach. And it says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new markdown file. I'm going to call it RDS. I'm going to put it in this folder. It figures out what RDS is. It understands that and says, this is the title I'm going to give it, and I'm going to include a description. And then it pauses there and asks me, do you actually want me to do this? Okay. And if I tell it I want it to, which I did, it will go off and generate code and create a new pull request in this repository. And so if I come back over into my code and go to pull requests, we can see here's that RDS page that was created by the AI agent by Amazon Q. And if I come and click on this, right, you see that summary again. And if you look at the change, here's the page that it created. And here I like that a little bit bigger, right? And it went and created a new RDS page and went and wrote a description for that page. So this is an extremely simplistic example, but it can go in and actually add new functionality, add new features to your application. Or if you've got bugs, can go in and figure out what that bug is and put in a PR that is a fix to the bug that you just found. And all of that's built in. So with that, I am just about at time. I'm going to wrap up here. We don't have time for questions, but I will be kind of floating around if anyone wants to talk and hear more about this.
All right.
Thank you.